The destructive ray collided with the wall of Tensukyaku, causing the building to shake violently. It was a terrifying impact, but its power was nothing compared to what it would have been if it had been released without converging. Even if the amount of energy is the same, the pain felt is different when hit with a surface and when stabbed with the tip of a needle. By the same logic, the power of the concentrated destructive beam was orders of magnitude greater, even though it had the same energy. Guy remained calm despite seeing this, but the others were speechless. GRRR, that's a power that seems to rival my Dragon Star explosive flame Drago Nova. I can handle it. You idiot. There's no point in arguing whether you can endure it or not. That's true. Either way, the rate of energy loss is greater when you're hit with it on your entire face. Even if you converge it and pierce the target, the amount of damage will likely be less. Milim and Veldora were just pretending to be tough, but Velgrind and Velzard were calmly analyzing the situation. Velgrind nodded, agreeing that Velzard was right. In fact, Velgrind had put herself in the same situation and was predicting which would cause greater damage. The answer she found was that being hit on the entire face would increase the defensive area and would also consume a large amount of energy. For spiritual life forms, physical loss is merely damage that can be regenerated. Unlike humans, they do not have vital organs, so even if a hole is made in the body, it is not fatal. However, if you are hit in the wrong place, you could lose the lower half of your body, making it difficult to continue fighting. If you end up expending a lot of energy to compensate, the amount of damage you can ignore will exceed your ability to tolerate. In that sense, it is important to make decisions at each stage, such as whether to ignore it and take it as it is, avoid it, or defend yourself. This time, Guy chose to evade. Therefore, there is zero energy loss. Not only that, this is also an important step forward. What is that? Kyaha. Ivalage was confident of his superiority. Guy, who had effortlessly cut through the destructive rays, avoided the converged beam. The destructive beam that is released to fill the entire surface is convenient as it can be fired quickly without having to aim. If you converge it, you will need to worry about accuracy, but if you think of it as a game, it can be fun. Ivalage seemed absorbed in his new game and fired a barrage of converging destructive rays at Guy. Kaihohata. For Ivalage, who boasts a bottomless amount of magical energy, this level of spam is like a walk in the garden. Without feeling tired, he thrust his left hand forward and fired a succession of convergent destructive rays. Guy dodges. Even though it was a near-light speed attack, he was able to perfectly predict the point of impact from the movement of Ivalage's palm, the fluctuations in the air, and the smell of burning air. While doing so, he prepares World Waldo and aims at Ivalage. I'll finish this soon. How cheeky. You. Guy dodged the converging destructive rays being spammed and closed in on Ivalage. Then he thrust out the world he was holding in his right hand, aiming for Ivalage's heart. This was the central core of Ivalage. Due to the high energy density, this was predicted to be one of its weak points. The moment Ivalage got close to him, both his sword and destructive ray were sealed away. If Guy's attacks had worked, that would have been the end of the battle. Kyaha. Guy thrust out the World Waldo and approached Ivalage. At that moment, Ivalage's chest glowed. The high energy density was due to the fact that he intended to fire a beam from there. I win. The recently fired convergent destructive beam of light, traveling at sublight speed, hadn't even diffused yet when it reached Guy's chest. It was not the right timing to avoid it, and Guy was in a desperate situation. It was only natural that Ivalage was confident of victory, but sweet. Guy had a relaxed expression. World Waldo, Pierce's Ivalage. Kyaha. Ivarage couldn't understand what had happened. Just before it touched Guy's body, the convergent destructive rays dispersed. The reason for this was Guy's authority. To Guy, who could recreate Rimuru's authority, Gluttony King, Beelzebub, all. Emission-type attacks were nothing more than fodder that could be preyed upon. Guy had been able to prey on Ivarage's attacks from the start, but he had deliberately dodged them because he had been waiting for this moment. He hadn't used up that much energy, so by the time he was hit by this attack, he had already fully recovered. Guy said arrogantly, as usual, it's no big deal. In response, Ivarage let out a cry of resentment. You, Yao Yai. Just when I thought I had won, I felt like I had been thrown into hell. Before I even realized that I was angry, I was screaming out of frustration. Ivalage glared at Guy. Her beautiful face, which was identical to Lucia's, was distorted by hatred. Even Ivarage could not ignore this blow. It was not a fatal blow, but it was the first time he had ever been aware of the damage. This was a nostalgic experience for Ivalage. Guy was the cause back then, so remembering it makes me even angrier. At this moment, for the first time in his life, Ivarage recognized Guy as an enemy. As if targeting the gap in consciousness, Ivarage's body was enveloped in countless lights. Veldora and the others had become spectators, but they were receiving orders from Guy through thought transmission. Get ready, and ready to launch a full-power attack when I give the signal. Hearing this, Veldora complained. Grrr, Guy, acting all high and mighty. Milim joins in on this. Really, you can't order me around like that. He was unable to say that statement until the very end. At that moment, a cold breeze blew through, ordering me, what is it? Hey, Milim and Veldora-chan too, do you have any complaints? Try saying that, Velzard said with a smile. No, I have no complaints at all. Me too, of course I'll cooperate. Thank you. Since it was Guy's request, I have to listen carefully. With that feeling, Velzard threatened them, or rather, asked them to do so, and everyone present agreed. And he watched the battle. Guy dodged the converging destructive rays with you, shoo. Shaku, shoo, and even had a smile on his face. It wouldn't be a fatal blow if it hit, but it was a dangerous attack that couldn't be ignored, and yet Guy didn't seem to feel it was a threat. Seeing Guy like that, Veldora grumbled. But sister, isn't Guy being too careless? If he gets hit, he won't get away unscathed, so he should be more careful. Veldora thought it was fine to have some composure, but Guy was going too far. He pointed that out frankly, but Velzard's reply was cold. You see, Veldora-chan. Guy is different from you, he is strong. Stop judging him with your common sense. Veldora thought as she told him with a smile. I'm strong too, though. However, he was wise enough not to say anything, so he just nodded silently. Some say that rather than being wise, he was simply intimidated by his sister, but for the sake of Veldora's honor, he would lose if he cared too much about it. Ivalade's attacks became increasingly fierce and accurate. Seeing this, Milim started making a fuss. Is it really okay? I also acknowledge that Guy is a demon lord, but Ivarage was really strong, you know. Guy's fighting style is to avoid attacks by the tiniest of margins. He sometimes even manages to graze them, which makes the viewers nervous. Moreover, knowing the weight of Ivalade's blow, everyone except Velzard watched with anxiety. Velgrind remained silent because she did not want to anger her sister. If anything were to happen to Guy, she was ready to immediately come to his aid, and in order to answer Guy's request, she was refining a special move within her body. This is the most serious and correct response. Velzard also understood this and didn't say anything to Velgrind. Instead, she gently warned Veldora and Milim, It's about time to get ready. And then the moment came. The convergent destructive beam that was fired from Ivalade's chest hit Guy. Directly in the chest. Look, thought Veldora. I thought so, Milim thought. I don't think Guy will die from this, but a decrease in his fighting power is inevitable. If he had gone all out, that would be one thing, but if he went in alone and acted confident, but failed, then it's only natural that people would complain. Therefore, the two of them took this opportunity to criticize him, and were about to insist that they should all challenge him together without being stubborn. But before they could say anything, Guy gave an order. Now. At that moment, Veldora and Milim reflexively unleashed their special moves. Naturally, Milim used her full-power Dragon Star Explosion Flame Ha, Drago. Nova. He fired at Ivalage with enough power to shatter the equipment in both hands. Veldora fired the humanized version of Thunderstorm Roar, Ver. IIIT was the special move he had tried to use on Milim in her rampage, but was stopped by Chloe. It had a higher energy density than the Thunderstorm he unleashed in his dragon form. Just like Milim's pose, he held both palms forward and his wrists together, like the jaws of a dragon, and unleashed it with all his might. Velgrind is excellent. Without any delay, he unleashed Scorching Dragon Overlord Acceleration. Excitation, cardinal acceleration at maximum output. And Velzard was also the first to use Whiteout Absorb. She had intended to scold anyone who was late, but fortunately no one was rude, so Velzard was satisfied. And so, just as Guy had intended, all four of them used their special moves at the same time. These were the strongest people in the world, so the timing was perfect. At that moment, just as Guy had wished, an immense destructive force was generated. Nice job, you guys. Guy praised him. Although this rarely happens, Milim and Veldora will likely be dissatisfied and think that he is arrogant. Anyway, Guy had no intention of leaving the matter with Ivalage to someone else. He activated Gluttony King Beelzebub as if it were his own property, devouring the unprecedented energy that was supposed to be raging on the spot. He then integrated it all together, treating Milim's Dragon Star Explosion Overlord Drago Nova as a separate entity, and reconstructed it into a single directional wave. It's an unbelievable act. The combined destructive energy began to swirl around Ivalage. Kyaha. The smile had disappeared from Ivalage. He realized that if that much energy hit him directly, he wouldn't escape unscathed. At the same time, questions arose as to why that decisive moment had not yet arrived. The ultimate destructive energy continues to circulate around Ivalage. Seeing this, Veldora and Milim were indignant yet amazed. My power. Grin, first stop acting like Rimuru. I can't believe that even my powers would be used. This is too reckless. Velzard and Velgrind were more shocked than shocked. Oh my, if you can even do something like that, there's no way I could have. 1. I agree. The game with Rudra ended just because Guy had to go on a business trip. That's true. That's probably why he was so insistent on a proxy war. It was just as Velzard said. There's no fun in a game where the win is guaranteed. Guy believes that if you're going to compete with someone, it's best to take risks. Diablo was the same, and Testarossa, Carrera, and Ultima would probably agree. Even Mazzari and Rain would agree with this way of thinking. The common thinking among Gensho and the others was that competitions are fun because there is a possibility of losing. And Guy was good at competitions. Since his defeat at the hands of Veldanava, he had not experienced a single defeat. It was Guy who once repelled the Ivalage. And it's the same this time. Now I'll give you something that hurts. Feel it until you die. Catastrophe. Acropsy. Guy unleashed his technique. It fuses with the destructive energy that was circulating around Ivalage and demonstrates its true potential. Catastrophe aesthetic hell. This secret technique is the power of destruction. Although it has some similarities to Moss's Infinite Eater, its essence is completely different. It is a malicious technique that diverts the energy contained. In this technique to inflict damage and continue it, it can be used multiple times and can be stacked or used repeatedly. Furthermore, once damage has been inflicted, it cannot be recovered. If there is physical damage, healing magic and other magic spells are nullified. All of the natural healing energy is also drained, so it is so vicious that it is inevitable that the enemy will eventually run out of strength. This time, Guy incorporated not only his own maximum energy into this technique, but also the power of Veldora and the others. All of that was converted into negative energy that annihilated everything and was devoured by Ivalage. It is a pseudo-nothingness. It can be said that it is safer and superior in that it is controllable. Once Guy and the others had recovered their energy, they could use this technique again. On the other hand, Ivarage had no way of recovering to perfection unless he broke Guy's catastrophe eclipse. Not only was he doing his best just to maintain the status quo, but from this point onwards, he was facing a future where he would become increasingly worn down. I was also affected by that, Milim muttered quietly. Although she didn't remember, she knew that when she went berserk, Guy and Ramirez had brought her back to her senses. She hadn't been told how, but Milim thought that this technique would be possible. In fact, that was the correct answer. Even though Milim was trying to increase her power, Guy was able to adjust the balance by weakening her. It was easier said than done, but it was because he had achieved this that he was where he is today. Combining Guy's exceptional combat sense with his ultimate authority, he created a secret technique that was specialized to be effective against spiritual life forms, even effective against true dragons. That's harsh. Veldora nodded in agreement with Milim, looking stunned. Veldora also has memories of being defeated by Guy. He insists that it has nothing to do with who he is now, but a loss is a loss. The problem was that I didn't remember what had happened that led to the defeat. There was no guarantee that they would win the next battle, so Guy was a target of caution for Veldora as well. By the way, since it's practically like she's already lost to her two sisters before the fight even begins, it would be more accurate to call them something to be feared, rather than something to be wary of. Setting aside the issue of Veldora, Jijajijajijajig. Ivarage then lashed out in frustration. His entire body was engraved with cursed marks from which magical energy was leaking. This state would continue unless Guy released his authority, even though Ivarage boasted an unimaginably huge amount of magic essence and energy. If this continued, he would eventually run out of power. The time for a resolution is soon approaching. It was the first time since birth that Ivarage had felt such intense pain. Experiencing this, Ivarage went berserk. He blindly charged at Guy, but his attack was parried and he crashed into the wall. The Tensukaku shook violently, and cracks appeared on the walls that were supposed to be indestructible. Haha, look, with my catastrophe eclipse, it looks like I can even negate the laws established by Veldanava. Guy said, laughing happily. The absolute and unchanging providence established by God that was now being shaken by Guy's authority. That was only natural, as Guy's ultimate ability, ultimate skill, prideful king, Lucifer, had acquired a new ability and achieved transcendence evolution. Its name is ultimate ability, ultimate skill, Nodin's god of the abyss. This authority was created when Guy observed Rimuruz's ability modification, alteration, on Velzard and modified his own authority based on his own interpretation. It surpassed all existing powers. Ultimate ability, ultimate skill. Nodens, god of the abyss, the powers. Contained within it were diverse, including thought acceleration, omnipotent. Perception, demon lord haki, soul. Con, violence, defense, consumption. Food, imaginary space. Ability creation, ability duplication, ability preservation. Space-time control and multidimensional barrier, and it covered everything Guy had learned up until now. It was truly an authority that reached the realm of God. Guy smiled fearlessly and glared at Ivalage. It seemed that he had finally received fatal damage after taking a direct hit from Guy and the others' techniques. On the other hand, if they hadn't gone to such lengths, there would have been no chance of defeating him, so there was no doubt that he was an incredible monster. Even so, Guy will win. Even if it had been a one-on-one fight, it would have been possible to deal with it without any problems. However, it would have taken too much time and the damage would have been unavoidable. This time, with the help of his allies and the favorable conditions of the battlefield. Being Tensura, the damage was kept to a minimum. How lucky, Guy thought with satisfaction. Even so, Guy changed his thoughts. As expected, this authority is incredible. Rimuru is truly the one to be feared, Guy thought. I evolved the ultimate ability, ultimate skill, god of the abyss Nodens, and after using it, I understood it. With soul devouring, which can devour everything and turn it into energy. Emission-type techniques are nothing more than fodder. On top of that, the combination of teleportation and sword techniques is invincible, and if I focus on defense, I don't feel like I'll even get hurt. There's no way I'll lose in an energy attrition battle. Guy was analyzing himself. And at the same time, I think Rimuru is really making stuff up, he thought. Seeing Rimuru's authority, Guy realized something. He realized that the concept of combat had changed. The amount of magic essence, or energy, no longer determines victory or defeat. As long as he has Soul Devour, which allows him to devour the opponent's energy and make it his own, he can be certain that he will not lose. What was important was a way to hinder the opponent's recovery. If the opponent does not have this, victory is certain. Without this terrifying power, he would have had a much harder time fighting Ivalage. But this is not the end. As he watched Ivalage thrashing about, groaning in pain, Guy turned his attention to the next battle. Ivalage groaned in agony. That was also a first-time experience for me. Pain. This is the real thing. The pain I had felt earlier was nothing compared to this agony. Although Ivalage does not have the ability to sense pain, it does feel discomfort. He perceived the magical essence and energy that continued to flow out of him as an endless sense of loss. For Ivalage, this was nothing but pain. That's not all. Before I knew it, I realized that I no longer felt the bond with my children that I had always felt. Dead. My children. Why? Anger, resentment, hatred. Ivalage did not understand the true nature of emotions. But now I have learned it through experience. The countless emotions served as fuel, filling Ivalage. The Dragon of Ruin will grow even stronger. Chapter 4, Dragon of Ruin. Veldanava revived 3 monsters and summoned them. No, that's not an accurate expression. Unlike Rumina's resurrection, they were not completely revived. At first glance, it looked like they had returned to life, but the monsters were simply standing up, without any consciousness. I thought it was just for show, but it couldn't be that simple. To begin with, the 3 had died in distant locations, even if they were in the vicinity. To have brought them back to life and summoned them all the way here was an act of God on a par with, or even greater than, that of Rumina's. I decided to keep a watchful eye. My instincts told me that it would be dangerous to interfere carelessly. It is generally believed that revived monsters are weak, but since they are originally monsters, we cannot let our guard down. This battlefield is covered in a barrier, a holy purification barrier that annihilates magical energy. That's why it may have been impossible to restore the soul, but I thought that if Ruminas could do it, there was no way Veldanava couldn't, and that was the right decision. Now then, I think this will be enough bodies to serve as vessels. If there are only 3, then who will work the best for me? Veldanava said as he thrust his arm forward. 3 pale blue orbs of light were summoned from his palms and were gently sucked into each of his bodies, dwelling within them. We have confirmed interference with spacetime. It appears that souls with strong wills have been summoned from different locations. Ah, I see. He summoned someone's soul and gave it a body that he had prepared. That's an incredible amount of energy, and he must have been quite a strong man. With these guys inhabiting the bodies of monsters, it seems like things won't be easy. Grudge summoning summons those who have a grudge against this world. Even after the deaths of the heroes who adored Rudra, they were brought back to life by replicating their memories as information lifeforms, digital nature, so that they could obey the heroic soul guidance Hasha no Yorub. Well, this one is the real thing, though. Veldanava stated calmly. It's a terrifying statement that will send chills down your spine. The heroes Masyuki summoned were supposed to be reproductions of past memories inhabiting temporary bodies. They were practically real, but not the real thing, dead heroes or Einherjar. However, it seemed that Veldanava had summoned the soul of that person, who was on the verge of disappearing from the spacetime just before he had completely died. It doesn't matter what time it is, past, future, or present. In other words, it is a foul play. If such an act were possible, the concept of the dead wouldn't even exist. That's what we should do before misfortune strikes. If he had such omnipotent power, wouldn't it have been better if he had brought his dead wife back to life? I retorted. Some may say that it is taboo to revive the dead. However, I don't think so. It would be one thing if they had lived out their natural lifespan, but if they died before they could achieve their goals, it would be hard to give up. If there was a way to bring him back to life, I would jump at it without hesitation. In fact, that's what happened with Shin and the others. As a result, we are where we are today. However, it is wrong to desecrate the dead. If the person ended his life satisfied, his wishes should have been respected. I don't want to control the life and death of others, and I don't think we should. Well, normally you can't ask the opinions of dead people, so it's pointless to think about it. However, if you're thinking of destroying the world because someone you love has died, I think you should try to revive the dead without worrying about whether it's taboo or not. But then why? He didn't nod. It's not that I was rejected. I just looked for it and couldn't find it. Ah, I see. Maybe he's already been reincarnated. Normally, it takes time for the soul to disperse, but there are cases where the soul is reincarnated immediately after death. Even though I'm still alive, I can hear the language of the world. Well, that's just how it goes. That being said, it's hard to say that we should give up. So, Lucia, right? There's a chance that Lucia could have been reborn into this world too, so I think it's a bit strange to just destroy everything so quickly. I tried to persuade him. I can understand Veldanava's anger, resentment, and despair, so I hope he will reconsider. It feels like it's no longer a matter of persuasion or anything like that, but the truth is that I don't want to fight if possible. However, my hopes were dashed. I've already decided. I have my daughter, Milim, and I have Ivalage in place of Lucia. Immediate revival is impossible, but after I destroy the entire world, if I slowly collect and decipher the information children, The day will come when Ivalage will become the complete Lucia. Oh no. It was a daunting method, but it didn't seem impossible. He thought that Veldanava, being a god, would eventually achieve it. In this situation, it becomes difficult to persuade them. I myself couldn't think of any words that would convince him. One common way to persuade her would be to say that Lucia doesn't want that to happen, but if she responds with, "How can a stranger understand her feelings?" I'd be at a loss for words. In fact, I've never met him. You can't get by in this world with idealism alone. We have no choice but to defeat it. Hey. He explains it simply, but it's an easy thing for you, master. I don't know what to do, but Seal has become aggressive. Well, I can see that it's a quick and reliable solution. That is, if we ignore whether it's possible or not. It's absolutely fine. As always, he has incredible confidence. Or rather, why are you so motivated? It would be kind to stop them. I see. Certainly, it also stopped Millam's rampage. I didn't want anyone to become a victim, so that Millam wouldn't be sad later. That's right. Maybe Veldanava is the same. I don't know them, but there are many people who are connected to Veldanava. I thought it would be troublesome if those people turned against me, but that wasn't the case. In order to prevent anyone from feeling sad, the best thing to do would be to defeat Veldanava here and calm him down. Right now, Veldanava was so overcome with grief that he seemed to be running wild. There's even a chance he's not sane. This is because the people who brought him back to life, by inhabiting the three monsters, were among the worst people I knew: Sorcerer Emperor Jahil, Third Three-Demon Yo Marshal Sui, Cornu, and lastly, Vega, who was supposed to have been sent to the end of time and space. Yes, it was a very impressive lineup. Jahil is the one who brought misfortune to Kagari and the others, and if you trace it back to its roots, you'll find that he is the one who summoned Guy, the fool who I